Today I'll be fixing an iPhone 7 Plus LCD. More specifically, I'm replacing the front screen. First step is turn off your device. Then the next thing you're going to do is take the bottom two screws out. The tools you need today is a pentalobe screwdriver, a Phillips screwdriver, and a tri-wing screwdriver, and a flat spudger tool. Doesn't have to be one of these, but it's preferred. One of the easiest ways of getting into these guys is get this the tip of your thing over here by that left speaker bracket and just pry just very gently. This one's already been opened for, so the adhesive's a little lighter. And if you need to, either use a hair dryer or some other sort of somewhat lower temperature heating source to loosen the adhesive. Once you have the device actually open, I like to take something, it doesn't really matter what it is, to prop up behind it. I'm just using a big thing of hand sanitizer because it's around. Handles a lot of phones, so use it. Then you want to take out these three screws. Be careful of where and how you organize your screws because you don't want to lose them. And keeping them organized will not only make the repair go smoother, but it'll also make the reassembly go quicker as well. Once you got those three screws out, what you want to do is carefully just lift up on this panel. I like to keep everything organized, so I'm going to put it with there. Next step, disconnect the battery. Use your fingernail or a spudger tool to reach over there and carefully lift it up. Next, you want to disconnect your LCD ribbon cables. Okay, this part is a little difficult because what you want to do is not rip that or put too much stress in there. So what I do is I rotate like that, and then I rotate it again, and that allows me to get a slightly easier angle at the two screws up here. Remove these three screws, then the plate that goes underneath it, then either use your finger and pry up gently, or if it's an 8, you want to actually lift from the ribbon cable very carefully, but that will be for a different video. Once you actually have the screen removed, you can set the actual phone aside. Depending on what type of assembly you have, you'll either have one that has a full assembly, a partial assembly, or a back plate. Remove any packaging materials that come along with it. You can set that aside for a second as well. Now what we're going to do is remove the screws for the top and bottom. These screws keep the ear bracket in place, the earpiece, and the ribbon cable that controls the front-facing camera, the ear speaker, and the proximity sensor, and I believe the ambient light sensor as well. Once you get those screws out, place the bracket beside it, then carefully push back over there. Don't touch the actual camera itself directly on it because your fingerprint oils will get on there. Now, what you want to do is take out the home button, or at least the bracket for it. I can remove it without heat. However, I always recommend using some form of heat source to gently heat up the front to make the adhesive loosen slightly. This will make removing it slightly less infuriating and less risky. Next, what you want to do is disconnect the ribbon cable for the home button. I do that by gently getting my fingernail underneath it and lifting carefully. That will expose the ribbon cables. Then what I do is put it on a heat plate. Alright, so what I just did is I took it to my heat plate and let it sit on there for about 1.5 minutes. The reason why you do this is you want to get the heat slightly higher. Now this part is very important to be done correctly. Use my thin tool, get underneath the existing cable where it clicks into the actual screen itself. Then what I do is I get my thin tool underneath the ribbon cable on the right side and carefully rock it underneath it. If you damage this cable, it's not replaceable as of yet. And if you do replace it, it would just be for cosmetic value. So do not rip the home button. Be very careful, take your time. Alright. Just take your time with the repair, and if you run into any sort of difficulties like adhesive lifting up, just grab another tool. Alright. Now that I've gotten the adhesive separated from the thing, just pretty much lift up and take it out. Can't hurt to actually inspect your part afterwards, make sure you don't have any tears. And then proceed with removing the top bracket and camera. So underneath the right side, at least when inside it, get underneath this ribbon cable, do a pry and rock underneath this part right over here. Then what you want to do is take this part, your flat part of your thin tool, get right by the proximity sensor and gently break the bracket off. Because if you try just pulling it out, sometimes you can actually separate the part of the proximity sensor from the ribbon cable. Then you would have to replace that part. Similar process goes with here. You'll pretty much getting your part, the tool underneath the ribbon cable, gently rocking like that, and then lifting it out with your fingers. Now that we have these separated, it's time to install them onto the new screen. I like to start with the home button because the less time you leave that thing sitting out, less vulnerable it is. You can do this in any order. You can do the top first, the bottom first, it doesn't matter. As long as you actually install them, you should be good. Not every screen you'll order will click in easily. Thankfully, we order high quality screens, so we have no issues typically. If your ribbon cable is slightly too short, it might be difficult to actually plug it in. In that case, you may have to adjust it slightly. There's a small circular notch that actually exists on the ribbon cable itself, which lines up with a small groove, or with a small divot, should I say, on the actual frame of the phone screen. If it doesn't line up with that, lift the home button slightly and try to adjust it so it'll actually click in. Put your home button screws back in place. This one has been repaired before, so it's missing one screw. This one's not crucial over here, but you never want to intentionally leave out the screws. So it depends on the quality of your screen, but you may or may not want to snap the brackets that come with it off, because oftentimes they don't line up properly. I just use my fingernail and remove that piece that's existing over there. Also, separating the bracket if it's stuck to the existing camera flex could possibly disconnect the sensor from the cable itself, so you want to be gentle with that. Then you want to install these screws back in the order that you got them in. Sometimes it helps to have your finger on top of the bracket when you're putting the first couple of screws in, just to keep it in line with the screw holes and the actual frame. Once you have all your screws installed, grab your phone, and it's time to reinstall it. What I like to do to make the process easier is to click in the first one, the top ribbon cable for the camera. I like to click that in first. Click it into the motherboard carefully. Then grab your bracket and your screwdriver with your screws. Take a note of how I'm holding it. I have my middle finger behind the LCD, my thumb on the LCD as well, so I'm holding it in place. And I have my pointer finger actually on that little bracket to keep it in place so it doesn't move around. Now that I have it like that, rotate your phone over, then go like this. That way you don't put any extra pressure on any of the ribbon cables. Then what you want to do is hook your ribbon cables back to the board. Like so. Make sure everything's connected right, then plug your battery back in. Then we're going to install the last bracket, and we're almost done. Now the fun part, closing it up. So pivot it closed like a book. Then you want to get the top part of the screen, there's two plastic ridges, lined up, close it, start with the bottom, press down, then work your way up on the sides carefully. Don't pinch it too hard. Also, if you feel any resistance, do not force it. You should feel a little bit of resistance, but it shouldn't feel like you have to push it hard to get it in. If you do feel some resistance, take the screen back up, detach it from the board, and look in the edges. Sometimes some of the screws from the frame itself will lodge into the sides, and that will prevent you from closing it. And there you have it. iPhone 7 Plus screen repair. Also, make sure to test your screens when you're all done or before you get started. Thank you. This was Repair for Everyone.